Things like Every Child Ready to Read, those messages, all of that, the very high promotion of early literacy and early childhood education. Parents of kids like mine hear that stuff, but there's no help for them to kind of adapt, or, you know, how is this going to work? If you, yeah, so that was the reason I did that. So I wanted to, I'm not going to talk about my theory because you guys are, some of my students are in the room, and so they've had this hammered over their heads. But really, it's a systems approach. It's very in line with, you know, with the social model and all that kind of stuff. But really, what I want is to explore how children's library services can support development, can offer developmental support, and that's what I wanted to do. And you guys all have access to some of the articles that I've written, so if you're curious about that, you please read it. We don't have time for it now, but really what I want to privilege and what I want to promote today are the parents of children with disabilities that I talked to in my dissertation. So I did speak to librarians, so just in a nutshell, I looked at all those early literacy messages that we ourselves as we do with our posters and promotions and storytime messages and Every Child Ready to Read and all of that stuff, and the things that the health nurses tell the parent, all of that. I looked at all of that. That's part of my study. I interviewed children's librarians. Some of you are in the room. Thank you. I'm not allowed to tell you who, I'm not allowed to point you out, but anyway, thank you so much for participating. And I spoke to families of children with disabilities aged, I ended up with 13 kids, and they were ages 2 to 8. Boys and girls with a variety of disabilities, cognitive and physical disabilities. And I've made a video for you. It's got a soundtrack, and you're going to read, hopefully you'll be able to read their words, their statements about their experiences in libraries, and good and bad. Okay, so we're going to watch that. It's like about 3 minutes. Okay, like this is really challenging my abilities here.
I know,
it's
not
there we
easy.
go. Okay, here we go. way. So that saved me having to read out all of those things for you. And you notice that I didn't include all just the negative things, and I could have. I could have just said, look, this is the experience that parents of children with disabilities are having in their libraries, and made you all feel really bad. And that's not at all my intent. In fact, that's not what I'm finding at all. I'm finding, if you balance those out, I mean, really, when I did it on a chart of sort of, if you want to say positive experience versus not so positive, it was pretty even. So that is really one of the biggest things I'm finding, is that there is a mixed, experiences of inclusion and satisfying experiences in libraries, and then experiences where parents didn't feel as welcomed and had chosen to stop coming. So those are very important things for us to consider in our work. And so because time is running out, I'm going to just get to so my key findings. One of the things that I did find that is I want you to think about, is that the children who have physical disabilities had much more positive experiences in the libraries with regards to inclusion and being accommodated and having good social reactions and social welcoming than the children with behavioral disabilities that would impact their behavior. And you did notice that a lot of people reacted to crowded, noisy. There were several different people said that. It wasn't just one person going on and on about the noisy, crowded story times. It was quite a few different people said that. So that would clearly, a hot, noisy, crowded story time would be a problem for a child in a wheelchair. But the children who have behavioral difficulties, that was a huge barrier. And that they were also contending with disapproval or perceived disapproval from library staff and other adults in the library, and perhaps even other kids. So those are those social barriers, right, where they're like, I don't want to be judged, this is not really my place, I don't really want to go back there. What I think is happening is that children with disabilities who have behavior that gets a negative attention. Their parents avoid the library spaces, and then they have the limited opportunities to benefit from the things that we have, just like Megan in Chris's research didn't benefit from going to a regular preschool. So if these kids are not coming because they've been disapproved of, or the idea that I can't take my kid to that place because they're going to act in this way and they won't like it, that they're not coming. So they're not getting they perhaps are not getting the benefit of the kinds of programs that the kinds of things that we have. So I'm going to skip through this part because we don't have time. And Chris talked about the disability models, social and then skip through exclude. I'm going to go straight to my recommendations, because this is what you guys want to hear. We know about exclusion, we know about segregation. These are just sort of visuals of like what that is. Integration, this is also more for classrooms, and then inclusion. So inclusion is that everyone participates together. I use a definition of inclusion that is from the National Association for the Education of Young Children. They work together with I think it's called the DEC, Division of Exceptional Children, where early childhood inclusion supports the right of every young child and his or her family, regardless of ability, to participate, blah, blah, blah. And then in that definition, and you will see it if you read my articles because it's right in there, is a sense of belonging and membership, positive social relationships and friendships, and development and learning. Now these words sound a lot like what we strive to do in our work every single day, which is why I believe that this is not beyond what we can do. We absolutely can do that. Moreover, a lot of what we're doing already is inclusive. I believe we have an important role to play. I think the most important thing, I'll just skip past all that, was the slide I took out. I think the most important thing we can do is to carefully anticipate and plan for the participation of these children before they even arrive at story time. Is we need to anticipate them, plan for them. So plan those inclusive environments and address those barriers. If it's crowded, if it's noisy, we need to address those beforehand. That's that's what we need to do. So, and if they're not coming to your community, they're not coming to your programs, then it's because there's some barrier. It's up to us to tear down the barrier. So if they don't show up. So I've got 5 recommendations, and I go on and on about this. And there's my niece, who's now a goth 12-year-old. Over there, and she's got my 5 little monkeys. I think I was babysitting her that day. We need better academic preparation in our LIS and our Live Tech programs. So this seems obvious, but in fact, it's very lightly covered in most LIS and Live Tech programs, in some programs. And what there is tends to be around serving adults with disabilities, which is great, but we're supposed to be serving the lifespan, so we really need to have that more apparent in our programming, in our professional and paraprofessional preparation. We need ongoing professional development opportunities like this one. Thank you, Dana. It's exactly what I recommend. And thank you for asking me to come. There are many other people who could have done, like there's American librarians who could offer you as much or more than what I can as far as this work goes. There are people in this field who really can do training. And we need train-the-trainer models, so because not everyone can come. So what I really want you guys to do is take this material. It's going to be in the library, the tool shed. Take it, go to my website, go to Chris's website, email us, train your own staff. If you're in a coordinator, leader, manager position, develop your own staff training, draw on these resources and train your staff. And don't stop at your children's services staff. Train your frontline staff. The public doesn't know who's a librarian and who isn't. I find it very difficult to believe that any of us would look disapprovingly at a child having a tantrum and tell them they have to leave. I find that hard to believe. But this is what parents are experiencing. So somebody is giving them negative messages in the library about their children's behavior, so we need to train all of our staff. So that's number 2. Number 3, we need community outreach. We need to continue working on our contacts with the gatekeepers, the gatekeepers, the people who provide those specialized services for families. There's still a medical deficit model. Children who are disabled or labeled as disabled still have tons of therapies, and we need to kind of get in there and get into their circles and find out, let them know why we're relevant. I know I've broken into your, oh no, we're doing okay. We have your video, we have another thing from Chris we want time for, because he's got a PowerPoint for us. So I'm almost finished. So what I'm saying is that, I'll just give you a little anecdote. Because my son has a disability, we're connected with lots of people, other families whose kids have disabilities, and lots of service providers and whatnot. And there's a disability group that does a community resource fair. So they invite kids with disabilities and their families to find out what's in the city, lessons and various things like that. And the library goes. Those of you guys at Renfrew, I think, go. Or anyway, some of our colleagues, we go. But I was mentioning it to a woman who's the mother of one of these kids, my son's friends, and she said, the library's going to this. I just would never have thought that the library would have anything for our kids. Okay, so this is, like that's a perception that the library doesn't have anything for children with disabilities. Then, no wonder they're not coming. So thankfully, we always go to this fair, and I'm sure many of you do in your own communities. If you get invited, so you need to get invited, you need to get into gatekeeper. So outreach is key. Also, I don't want to be the only researcher in this field. It's lonely, like really, I don't. We need to have more library and information studies faculty doing research in this area of inquiry. We really, really need it. So if you ever feel like doing a doctorate or even another master's or a master, whatever, just let me know and I'll help you. And also, it may be more, PhDs aren't for everybody, believe me. But what we really need is to be open to participate in research that might be being conducted in our colleges and universities. We need to keep those lines of communication open with the education institutions that educate our profession, and be open to having researchers come into our site. So many years ago, a woman who called Roz Stuck did her postdoctoral study here in Vancouver, some of her postdoctoral study in one of our Mother Goose programs. So that kind of thing. It wasn't focused on children with disabilities at all, but the fact is she got involved in one of our library programs. So those are the things I recommend. And there's 5 of them, and that is pretty much it from me. So the next thing we have is Chris's PowerPoint, and he'll take us through to our break. Yeah. Okay, because he's got more for us. I really wanted to, you guys can hear from me anytime. You can hear from me anytime. And so Chris is only here now, and we won't have him back probably for a while. So off you go. You go straight through the break time.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll be quick. All those emails that went back between the 3 of us, a lot of those I filed away. I didn't realize this was at this moment.
Oh, that's okay.
To be read later, and then you're just like,
yeah.
Oh, well, the next one came, file that. So this is less about the content and more just about the spirit of the idea that everyone belongs in your library, everyone belongs in a classroom together. So there's not it's not so much focused on the stuff I'll show you here. It's just to give you the sense that there is so much out there. I do have some friends, Corbett O'Toole in disability studies, who are exploring libraries and access and inaccess at a very deep level. And they're like looking at how we organize and arrange books, where certain books get put on shelves in relation to the subject, and how disability is often sort of segregated and isolated within different arrangements of books, things like that, which is well beyond my focus on libraries. I did just want to show you, here's another kid that is a friend of mine. I call her Josie here. Megan is Megan's name, but Josie I don't have that permission for, so it's an acronym, so I have to try to remember that. She was actually fully included through from early in her life, but it was an interesting version of inclusion where really academics were just somehow really left out. Access to general ed academics were just not a part of anyone's perceptions, including the family, and certainly including the teachers. And so we came along. She was part of that same project that Megan was part of, which is still going on. And we introduced, so she has very complex disabilities, communication disabilities, presumed to have significant intellectual disabilities, although I don't think that's a fair judgment for anybody, quite honestly, but certainly not for Josie here. But we came in and we introduced her to a symbol system for communicating, for instance. So, here's my great task. This is called the pod. Could you twist that just a little bit? No, the volume thing.
Oh. Hey, exactly. Good job. That was perfect. Yeah. And so that's kind of like this idea.
So we came in. There is a big Mac switch. It's tech, but it's not very sophisticated. You record different messages, and the number of times you hit the switch, it goes to that message. But it was just a way to get her interacting and engaged with things. So I won't play you the video, but it's just her interrupting her teacher. But it was the first time in her life that she could interrupt her teacher with a voice, as opposed to throwing herself on the floor and going into, a fit. So it was just empowering. So we got her peers involved in the symbol system. And it's not just a page of symbols like for music class.